After the loss to the Bucks, the Pelicans locked up their lottery odds. I'll tell you the most likely scenario for the Pelicans in the draft and what it means for the future. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday, final show of the week, almost final regular season game, final regular season recap we're going to do. In today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, one more of those on Monday because the season ends on Sunday. But in the loss to the Milwaukee Bucks, the Pelicans sewed up their lottery odds. I'll tell you literally the odds for every pick that they could end up having here. And actually, there's an outside chance they could improve it. But for the most part, they're going to be locked in to fourth best odds. We'll go into everything in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Talk about how the draft could get kind of interesting for New Orleans as well. And then the standout performances from the loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. Let me know if you're an everydayer in the comments down below. I see y'all. I promise I do. Some of y'all have been doing it for a long, long time, which is even cooler in my opinion. So let's get into this. Pelicans losing to the Milwaukee Bucks sewed up their lottery odds. Pretty much. They're almost guaranteed to finish fourth. And in fact, the fourth best, fourth worst, whatever you want. Fourth in terms of best lottery draft odds here. And in fact, they cannot even get to fifth. Philadelphia beat the Washington Wizards the other night. The Pelicans losing this game means they have a 3-game lead on the Philadelphia 76ers in the loss column with only 2 games left to play for either of them. So even if New Orleans were to win out and Philly were to lose out, well, New Orleans is still going to be 4. Philly can't move from 5 here, at least pre-draft. New Orleans actually has a very outside chance of catching the Charlotte Hornets for 3rd and maybe tying there. And then they would split all of those lottery odds, which would be slightly hurting Charlotte, slightly improving things for New Orleans if that were to be the case. Charlotte has 61 losses. The Pelicans have 59. Charlotte's next 2 games are against the Boston Celtics. And you might say hey, well, the Celtics are good. They're going to beat Charlotte those 2 games. And yeah, look, that's the most likely scenario here. But the Celtics are locked into the 2 seed in the East. That is their seed. They have literally nothing left to play for. And while their coach is a freaking maniac, and I would not anticipate that he wants those guys taking tons of rest, tons of time off, bit of an outside chance that maybe somehow they win 2 games. Again, not likely, but if New Orleans were to lose out games against the Miami Heat and then the season finale on Sunday in the afternoon during French Quarter Fest against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 1 seed locked up, have for a minute, might not be playing many people, so we'll see how that one ends up going. But if New Orleans loses out and Charlotte wins out, you could split those lottery odds, which, hey, that would just boost things up a little bit for the New Orleans Pelicans. So right now, as it stands, with New Orleans at 4, and let's just kind of go off that assumption here, that seems pretty safe. They have a 12.5% chance at the number 1 overall pick. The lottery is for the top 4 picks, so you could get 1, 2, 3, or 4. Or drop 4 spots potentially if a doomsday scenario happens. And the everydayers know we already talked about that, and we'll talk about it a little bit in the next segment here too. So you could end up anywhere in the top 4. So you can end up anywhere from 1 to 8 at this point in time. The Pelicans have a 48.1% chance at the top 4, at a top 4 pick. So how do we get those odds? We can actually see the odds for every single draft pick that they have. And one of these numbers is going to freak you out, but don't worry about it. And I'll explain. So right now, as it stands with the 4th best lottery odds, the Pelicans have a 12.5% chance at the number 1 overall pick. From there, they have a 12.2% chance at the second overall pick. The third overall pick, they have an 11.9% chance at. And for fourth, they have an 11.5% chance at. If you add all of that up, it equals 48.1. That's why you get 48.1% chance of a top 4 pick. So when it comes to the fifth pick, they have a 7.2% chance of getting that. And then this is the number that's going to freak you out the next two. They have a 25.7% chance at the 6th overall pick, so dropping 2 spots, and a 16.7% chance at the 7th overall pick, and then just a 2.2% chance at 8th overall. And you're probably going like, wait a second here. The most likely by the odds scenario for the Pelicans to end up with is 6, dropping 2 spots. That's the most, 25.7, right? Followed by 16.7 at 7. I'm not a mathematician. Someone who is will need to correct me on this. That's like the mean or median. I forget which one it is. That's not that big of a deal. And when it kind of comes out to this, it's still not the most likely scenario. It might be the most likely single scenario, but doesn't mean it's the most likely scenario at all. And in fact, the Pelicans' average kind of weighted draft pick, when you think about it, is still kind of 4.4. So right where they are. You know, to end up at 6, it would take 2 teams behind them jumping up. And the teams behind them don't have like tremendous odds when it comes to it. Philly has a 42.1% chance. Brooklyn, I think, is in the 30% chance range for something like that. So it's not the most likely percent scenario type of thing for them. 37.2, then 31.9 for Toronto, 26.3 for San Antonio at 8. So that's where you start to see like the Pelicans could fall. It's still unlikely. The most likely scenario is they end up in the top 4, probably at 4, something like that. But look, the odds are good to end up with a top 4 pick in this draft, and that's encouraging because the draft is pretty good, and that's exactly what you want to see them, you know, when it comes to it here. Should, by the way, any teams end up tying, the way that it works is any team that is kind of tied, they just split their ping pong balls evenly, and any odd remainder and the better draft order position is given to a random winner. So it's literally like a coin flip if you end up tying a team when it comes to that for like who's 3, who would be 4. If they were to somehow end up with the same record as the Charlotte Hornets, you could end up 3, you could end up 4, but you split the lottery odds. One team will get, if there are an odd number, would get one more selection, and then the coin flip picks like which team is 3rd, which team's 4th, which is important for only like when it comes to dropping down spots potentially. So that's literally like the lottery matrix there for New Orleans. 12.5, 12.2, 11.9, 11.5. That's the kind of top 4 right there. A almost 50% chance at getting a top 4 pick, which is important. So let's look at how the draft could get interesting for New Orleans. Where does it become interesting for the Pelicans? I'll break that down because it's not the number 1 overall pick. That's kind of boring here. Let's break that down. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. And it's super simple. When any player scores 50 or more points during the 2024-2025 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. Just that simple. So after an epic 50-point performance, celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot delivered straight to your door. Maybe you're staying up late watching these games, you're hungry, or you just need a midnight snack. You can use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. If you need a quick and easy lunch the next day, with Dash Pass, you get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus, now you save even more with this NBA offer. So sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number 1 Pelicans podcast. No playoffs for the Pelicans here, but the future could be pretty bright depending on where they fall in the draft. And we're going to look at that in a second here. So stay updated on all the offseason news, draft coverage, expert analysis by subscribing to the Locked On Pelicans newsletter. Plus, you could win big by subscribing. Subscribe between April 7th, 2025 and April 30th, 2025 for a chance to win one of these amazing prizes, a $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your viewing experience, $300 gift card to Game Time to buy tickets, or a $200 gift card to Fanatics for a jersey and other gear. So get exclusive insight into free agency draft coverage and team updates delivered straight to your inbox with the Locked On Pelicans newsletter. Subscribe to enter today by clicking the link in the description below, or just go to lockedondaily.com. All right, let's talk more about the draft. And it could get kind of interesting for the New Orleans Pelicans here if they end up even at 4, and depending on how it goes. So here's where the draft gets interesting. It's not with the first or second pick. If they get number 1 overall, they're taking Cooper Flagg. It's just that simple. Simple as that. That's what's going to happen here. If they get the second overall pick, they're taking Dylan Harper. I would be thrilled with that scenario. I think he's going to be an incredible NBA player, an incredible guard. Fits exactly what New Orleans needs. There's no drama there. There's nothing particularly interesting there other than like what he'll bring to the team, but there's not like intrigue. What could it be? There's no mystery. Where's the draft get interesting? And it gets interesting at that 3, 4, 5 spot, I think, where New Orleans is, potentially going to end up, almost maybe likely going to end up in this scenario here. Cooper Flagg, no-brainer pick. Same for Dylan Harper. But then you look at players like Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, and a couple of other different guys that you could go with to try and kind of remake the team and make an immediate sort of impact. Look, I think Ace Bailey is going to be a very good NBA player, and that kid can score. And at 6'10", he's got just incredible size. But does he fit alongside Zion Williamson? If you have the 3rd overall pick, can you take him? Look, I understand the idea of you draft for talent, just ceiling, potential at the top end of the draft. But when New Orleans is trying to make the playoffs next year, do you go with somebody else? And so all of a sudden, if you're in the 3rd overall pick and Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey are off the board, you kind of look at these type of players and you're like, well, like maybe you just have to kind of like reach a little bit, but not too much, right? Like VJ Edgecombe, I think, can fit in right away to New Orleans, still has a huge ceiling. Looks like he should be able to shoot the ball well eventually. Can that happen right away? And if he does, well, that is definitely going to be a very good thing. And he is an explosive athlete that projects to be a very good defender as well, I think, at the NBA level, if you were to be more consistent on defense. But if maybe you feel he's a little bit too raw and you need someone that's going to help you, the Pelicans defense has really slid this year significantly. Do you try and go after someone like Colin Murray Boyles out of South Carolina? Like the NBA comp for him, he's not someone we've talked a lot about, and I want to do a show on him, or at least a longer segment, is Draymond Green. Like, he looks like that kind of player. He's probably the best defender to enter the draft since maybe Herb Jones. And when you look at the positional versatility that he has with a 7-foot wingspan, over 7-foot wingspan, at 6'8", he's going to be able to guard 1 through 5, it looks like, a la Draymond Green, and kind of give you what you need from there. And this is someone who moves the ball, has a very high motor, and can score inside, but also pass the ball too. Like, when you look at what he does, Draymond Green was kind of like a de facto point guard or, kind of connector for this team, for the Warriors for a long time. That's what Colin Murray Boyles does. He fits that mold exactly. It fixes you with some of the rebounding, as we talked about yesterday. That's a massive issue for the New Orleans Pelicans. Does that then just kind of unlock the team, right? Like Draymond Green, look, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, all of the stuff they had there, Kevin Durant. Draymond Green's kind of like some of the secret sauce when it comes to that. That's not breaking news here. And, does that allow you to play small ball in a way that you want to without kind of a more lumbering center, something like that? Like, there's definitely some of that. But he also is slightly undersized at 6'8", and New Orleans definitely needs just more size. It feels like just big people I don't know if Murray Boyles fits into that, but he's a really intriguing player that I think the more I watch, I'm going to really start to come along on and like. Do you draft a point guard for the future here? Say you're at 3, 4, 5, somewhere in that range. Do you go after Kasparas Yakachionis from Illinois, just a big guard at 6'6" that looks like he can be your point guard of the future and does appear to be fairly NBA ready? You have Derek Queen in there too. That fits maybe that Naz Reid type of role that you've looked for in a big that can stretch the court, be athletic. Those are all the type of things New Orleans is looking at. And that starts to open up, I think, in that 3 to, let's call it 8 range. That's where you could just literally do anything, right? I think tier 1 of this draft, there's one player in it, and it's Cooper Flagg. I think tier 2 is Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. I think tier 2.5 is VJ Edgecombe. And then I put a bunch of those names that I just mentioned in tier 3, right? I think you could put Edgecombe in tier 2 as well if you really wanted to. But Murray Boyles is in there. Trey Johnson's in there. Derek Queen's in there. Yakachionis is in there. Con Knippel's in there. I think some of those guys are kind of like right in that sort of range. I wouldn't be shocked if Jeremiah Fears jumps up. I would also not be shocked at all if Jace Richardson jumps up. Those are the type of players that look really, really interesting all of a sudden and fill very important needs for the Pelicans. That's where this draft can get interesting. And while I think the Pelicans, say they're at 3, I say it's interesting, they'd still probably take Ace Bailey, even if the fit isn't there. And as I told you, I talked to people with the Pelicans early in the season asking about Ace Bailey. And I was like, they're like, yeah, like he's definitely third on the board and all that. At the time, and that person's board, I'll say, I don't want to speak for the team on that one, but that person's board. And, I kind of said, I was like, is there fit? Like, what's the fit look like with Ace Bailey on this team as it's made up currently? And they're like, well, we saw the fit the past couple of years between Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, and we can kind of see how that ended up. Ingram's a talented player, was very good, but just the fit, despite it seeming like it could work, just never did. And can you run into that type of situation again, or is that just going to mean you never reach full potential? So would it be better to go in a different direction? And that bucks conventional draft wisdom. But at the same point, this isn't just like, if you try and do things conventionally, is that going to do you any good when the goal, as we know it right now, unless they trade Zion Williamson or something like that, is to get back into the playoffs next season? And if that's the goal, does drafting Ace Bailey make a whole lot of sense? And I think the answer is no. Would it be better for a VJ Edgecombe, who has upper end talent too, or some of these other guys that you think can make an immediate impact, but also be a long-term starter for you? And I think the answer to that could be, yeah, maybe that's a little bit of desperation over on Airline Drive in the Pelicans front office when it comes to it. But that's the type of scenario I think you would be looking at. And that is a rather important thing. If you go through a full-on rebuild, trade Zion, kind of blow it all up, you've got to then, and this is going to be a whole show. I was talking to someone about this the other day. You got to look at trading Trey Murphy. You got to look at trading Herb Jones. And I mean like a complete and utter teardown. A complete and utter teardown. That doesn't sound pretty fun to me. Like, that doesn't sound fun to me at all. And that's going to be, if you do it properly or try and do it, it's like a 5-year process, in my opinion. So if that's going to be the case, I don't know if New Orleans has like the appetite for that sort of thing. So hopefully, maybe this just works itself out and they end up number 2 overall or number 1 overall and can just pick the obvious guy. And we don't need to have any draft intrigue or anything like that. It actually make my job harder if it's like they get the number 1 overall pick. Because look, I can do a lot on Cooper Flagg and I will do a lot on Cooper Flagg. But when you know what the draft pick's going to be, I can't be like, who will they take? Right? Like, let's preview all these other guys, because what's the point of that when that's not who they're going to draft? We'd still probably do it because I like talking draft here, but it makes my life harder. So I still want that. Make my life harder, Pelicans. Basketball gods, make my life harder by putting the Pelicans at 1 or 2 in this upcoming draft. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree that it opens up at 3, or would you just do the move and take Ace Bailey? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. So coming up next, Pelicans lose to the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's actually look at some of the performances from here. Karlo Matkovic looking good again. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the energy of a live game. There's two more for the Pelicans. So whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup, finding great seats at a great price used to be a challenge until I started using Game Time. So Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the game and event gets closer. And with their all-in pricing, you see the total cost up front, no surprises at checkout. So here's what I love about Game Time. The last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. You can grab last minute seats for the Pelicans this weekend and save big with the zone deals. And you have peace of mind. You get seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and the lowest price guaranteed so you can book with total confidence. Their lowest price guarantee means I never worry about overpaying. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And for your second listen today, Locked On Saints. Just go to the YouTube feed. They've got, or just the podcast feed too. They got multiple types of shows on there now, including Saints Squad, where Ross Jackson is talking to some other of the biggest, not even some of the biggest other sports media names covering the Saints here over at the Locked On Saints Squad show. Shedeur Sanders, I'm on board with a QB. Take a QB in the first round. They're debating it. They're going to tell you who it would be, who they like the most. It's over at Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make them your second listen today. And the newsletter, the free daily Locked On Pelicans newsletter, subscribe over at lockedondaily.com, or it's in the link in the description below. So the Pelicans had a game. They played. They lost. 136-111 to the Milwaukee Bucks. Look, locked in at least the fourth best lottery. I was going to say the fourth seed. Yeah, fourth seed when it comes to lottery odds for New Orleans here. So, I don't know. That part's kind of cool when it comes down to it here. This one, look, if you don't want to watch it, it's fine. The Pelicans had 8 guys playing in this one. And, yeah, it wasn't particularly pretty. Kaylor Kelly, who you might not know, was just signed to a 10-day deal. He played 23 minutes in this one. That tells you like how it was going, right? All 3 of the two-way guys are playing tons of minutes when it comes down to it. You know, of guys that are just regulars in the Pelicans rotation that we expected this season, it was Antonio Reeves, Karlo, Matkovic, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. Elfrid Payton also playing in this one, but I wouldn't call him like a regular for the Pelicans. Basically, nobody played for New Orleans in this game. And yeah, when you do that and you're going up against a Bucks team playing Giannis, Kyle Kuzma, Brook Lopez, yeah, they're missing Damian Lillard, of course, but yeah, this one wasn't going to be pretty in any capacity here. So kind of is what it is when it comes to that one. But you had some good performances here. Keion Brooks Jr., 20 points. You know, he's shown that he could maybe be some wing depth. You know, he went 4 of 8 from 3. 50% is pretty eye-opening with that. 6 rebounds. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if they look to sign him to a deal next year, depending on what the roster looks like, especially if they make a trade where they send out more players than they bring back. You need some cheap wing depth, and Keion Brooks, 20 points is a career high for him. Has looked pretty good in limited minutes. Like I said with all of these guys previously, there's an asterisk on it that someone's got to score on this team, and basketball in early to mid-April at the end of the regular season is really fluky when it comes down to it. So keep that in mind. But overall, like, he's played well and he looks and moves like an NBA player. Off the bench, Lester Quinones also going for 21 points here. That was a team high for New Orleans in this one, 8 of 22 from the field. So that's not particularly great, but 6 assists, showing that he can do a variety of different things and kind of getting downhill and trying to attack the rim. The 3-point shooting was not there. He made 2, but it wasn't good overall. But he was trying to be aggressive and attacking, and you see the need for that type of like relentlessly aggressive guard. He went 2 of 11 from 3. That's important. You want that downhill attacker, and he was definitely doing it in this one. Look, Jamal Cain, two-way guy, right? 20 points, 7 rebounds from him, 3 of 7 from 3. You make your threes, you play like that. That'll at least get you on the Pelicans' radar. And Jamal Cain, who's been here basically all season long, has done a pretty good job in limited minutes. But the guys we really want to look at in this one are Karlo Matkovic and Antonio Reeves, along with Elfrid Payton to a degree as well. Let's start with Elfrid Payton. 15 assists. That's an incredible number. Just shows you the need for a point guard on this team, and that when the Pelicans were trading for DeJounte Murray, take Dyson Daniels and his successful season out of the mix for a second, they needed a point guard. They needed a point guard. They knew they needed a point guard. You're kind of seeing it with the assist numbers that Elfrid Payton is putting up, that when you have that guy that can set up teammates like that, it really does create some open things, and New Orleans did that. They took, by the way, 47 threes in this game, which is mind-blowing to me and not a number I ever thought we would see the Pelicans take. It's just a shame when it's, with nobody playing here. But Elfrid Payton, 15 assists, kind of showing proof of concept on, you needed a point guard. Antonio Reeves, quieter night from him, 16 points on 5 of 15 shooting, so not good efficiency, just 2 of 8 from 3. 3 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, though. He's a rookie. I think he's been impressive. He shot overall very well for this team. He's definitely going to be in the rotation next season. He moves well off ball and without the ball. That's the important thing that you see from him. Yeah, you're just not going to be perfect every night as a second-round pick. And then there's Karlo Matkovic, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 9 of them defensive boards. When you see a guy that's like they had 13 rebounds and 8 of them are offensive, that's great. But this team struggles when it comes to defensive rebounding, and you need guys to make an impact on the defensive glass. Karlo Matkovic was doing that. If he can rebound, he will find a big role on this team next season. When you look at the bigs that they have, he can be a bit of a shot blocker at times. He plays downhill and is a finisher. He scores well around the rim. He can finish lobs. He moves like an NBA player in the pick and roll. But the biggest thing that he might have going for him is the three-point shot. He's got to be willing to take those and do it consistently. He has at times, he hasn't at others, but he was 3 of 6 from deep in this game, and that's big. That's just a really big number. If he can be a guy that rebounds, blocks a shot here and there, and shoots threes, but isn't exceptional at some of the things, that's enough to be a role player on this Pelicans team. That's enough to get him into this mix and doing a variety of things for him next year, because that type of big man pairs really nicely with Zion Williamson, and that's kind of what it's about. So nice to see him with this kind of pretty good performance. That's a tough matchup against guys like Brook Lopez and Giannis out there and kind of just doing what he needed to do. Look, it's fun to see some of these young guys who may or may not be here next year, but it's still kind of fun to see them have very good nights, getting into double figures, getting into 20 points or more when it comes to it. So seeing that from Keion Brooks Jr., Quinones, Cain, all the two-way guys is pretty fun. And seeing solid performances from Karlo Matkovic. Look, Antonio Reeves, it's all right. That's going to happen. It's going to come and go a little bit, but he's shown enough that he can make an impact. I don't know. Guys played relatively well and you lose. I think that's exactly what we've wanted to see from the New Orleans Pelicans for a minute here. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. 2 more games tonight, Friday night, and then Sunday in the Smoothie King Center. We'll recap both those games, kind of the season, put it on ice next week, shift immediately into draft coverage, free agency, all of that stuff. We got it covered here on Locked On Pelicans. We're going to be 5 days a week for the foreseeable future. We won't drop down to 3 days a week until probably mid-July, maybe not even until September, something like that. So we got a lot of coverage here. I'm going to start getting guests on to do draft coverage, things like that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that's going to do it. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll be back with you all tomorrow. No, on Monday. Maybe tomorrow. Who knows?